Everyone seems to have a different opinion on who's making the World Test Championship final. So let's actually find out. I've built a simulator using every remaining test in this WTC cycle, and by the end of this video, we'll not only know who I think qualifies, but exactly what every team needs to do to get there. Before we start, a quick refresher. A test win is worth 12 points, a draw is worth 4, and it's your points percentage, not total points, that decides the table. So, let's see where everyone stands right now. So this is where we stand right now. Australia are comfortably top of the table with 7 wins from 8 tests and a points percentage of 87.5. South Africa are second and New Zealand aren't far behind them in third. But then there's a pretty big drop off. Bangladesh are on 58%, while India are all the way down in 5th at just 48%. And yet, India can still make the final. In fact, a lot of the teams at the bottom of the table, including Sri Lanka and even England, have a mathematical route still to the Oval. So rather than just guessing who's going to qualify, I'm going to simulate every remaining test in this cycle. I'll start with what I think is the most realistic outcome, and then we'll see exactly what each of these teams needs to do to get themselves into that top 2. Future series in the World Test Championship for this cycle. We'll start off by predicting India versus Sri Lanka, which will be most likely a 2-0. I'm going to go for the same scoreline in the Australia-Bangladesh, 2-0. England-Pakistan, I don't think that England will sweep it 3-0, but I think they'll get a 2-1, being the better team. South Africa and Australia will fight it out for a 1-1 draw. In my opinion, South Africa will then sweep aside Bangladesh 2-0. Bangladesh and West Indies should draw 1-1. New Zealand and India, I think India will have the fight in them to get a 1-1 draw. I think Australia-New Zealand is one of the most obvious 2-1s that I've seen. And you're seeing here, slowly the pack is starting to drift away. Australia, South Africa, India, and New Zealand being the guys on top. Pakistan and Sri Lanka should be a 1-1 draw. I think South Africa, England will be 2-1 with England grabbing the singular win. India and Australia, realistically, it's going to be a 2-2 draw, with Australia being the better team, but India home conditions. New Zealand, Sri Lanka will be probably a 2-0. And Sri Lanka, South Africa will be a 2-0 in South Africa's favour. Bangladesh, England, it's a very interesting one. It's played in Bangladesh. England, they aren't the force that they were before. So I'm actually going to say that's a 1-1. Probably my most controversial result of these predictions so far. But that's what I think realistically is going to happen. Pakistan and New Zealand will be a 2-0. And there you go. That's all of the series realistically predicted. We will change them as we look to see who's going through, but we're looking at South Africa and New Zealand to go through. And there we have it. After going through every remaining test, my most likely World Test Championship final is South Africa versus New Zealand. South Africa have done enough to finish first on around 71%, while New Zealand squeezed through in second on just under 65%. The two underdog nations, as per my simulation, are set to fight it out at the Oval, and I'm backing New Zealand. Let me know down in the comments who you would think would win in this final. And I know what you're probably thinking. What about Australia? They're at the top of the table right now, so how on earth have they managed to miss out? Well, this is where things get interesting, because if my predictions are even remotely close, Australia don't have as much room for error that 87.5% might suggest. So let's start with the teams currently sitting at the top of the table. How can Australia qualify? As you can see, Australia only marginally behind New Zealand in terms of PCT in that third spot. So really, they only need one more result to go in that favour. The most direct route would be just to gain that extra win. It's a 4-match series between Australia and New Zealand. I've put them as 2-1 with 1 draw. And if they can go and win that extra game, they go through. However, if this doesn't happen, they can go and win an extra test anywhere else. For example, in the India series, winning that India series 3-2 or 3-1, it's not going to matter a lot. And even if they don't do that earlier in the cycle, if they can get an extra win against South Africa, That would also put them on this magic number of 68.18 and put them in that second spot, a repeat of the 2025 World Test Championship final, South Africa versus Australia. So, in summary, Australia have the 2 Test series against Bangladesh, the 3 Test series against South Africa, the 4 Test series against New Zealand, and the 5 Test series against India. They need to win 8 out of those 14 games. The most realistic scenario is for them to get 2-0 against Bangladesh at home, a 1-1 draw in South Africa, a 3-1 at home versus New Zealand, and a 2-2 draw away in India to put them on that 68.18. Alternatively, if they only win 2-1 against New Zealand, I put them, if they can get a 3-2 win against India, that would put them on the same PCT. And I also showed you some other scenarios as well. But the most important thing that they need to do is that they need to win 8 games. And now we get to India. In my original simulation, India don't make the final. They finish in 4th position on a PCT of 51.85, which is actually pretty impressive considering where they started. But the problem is, India have left themselves almost no room for error. They have 9 Tests remaining, and they basically need to win the vast majority of them to even get into the conversation. So, can India actually turn this around? Let's find out exactly what they need to do. For India, their first non-negotiable is to win 2-0 in Sri Lanka, and then they travel to New Zealand, where I would say they need to also get that 2-0 victory, and then that leaves them to restricting Australia to 1 Test win, and they need to win at least 3, and that will comfortably put them there. But what if they can only get a 1-1 draw in New Zealand? That would put New Zealand there. There is still a chance, although very, very slim. First of all, they would need to restrict Australia to no wins. And then, even 4-0 wouldn't work. India would need to thrash and whitewash Australia 5-0 to get in. And that makes this series against New Zealand all the more important. So, India can still make the World Test Championship final, but looking at the numbers, they've got almost no room for error. They need to beat Sri Lanka 2-0, win 2-0 away in New Zealand, and then take at least 3 of the 5 tests against Australia. And even then, they're relying on the teams above not having perfect records. So it's absolutely possible, but India need to be almost perfect from here. But that's why, despite sitting 5th right now, I wouldn't rule them out just yet. Now, Sri Lanka. And honestly, this might be the craziest qualification route of them all. They're currently sitting down in 6th, and by my baseline prediction, they'll finish bottom. But they have a lot of games on their side. And if they get the results they need, Sri Lanka can actually finish top of the entire WTC table. But how realistic is that? Let's put it into the simulator. So as you can see, I only have Sri Lanka to win 2 games in the entire of the WTC cycle, which is the primary reason that within the baseline simulation they are bottom. But if they can win 6 out of their 8 remaining games, then they could even qualify for the final. And that starts with the home series against India. If they can draw this series 1-1, and then against Pakistan get a 2-0 victory in subcontinental conditions, then you can already see them challenging for the top 2 places. Then comes the difficult series against New Zealand and South Africa. In particular, the New Zealand one is away. But if they can grab 1 Test win, and draw that series 1-1, then it sets them up to potentially win 2-0 in home conditions against South Africa, their spin attack leading the charge, and that would put them at the top of the table. Let's go back to the New Zealand series and say the conditions are too difficult for them to adapt to, and New Zealand win that series 2-0. All is not lost then. If earlier in the cycle they win 2-0 against India, they would still advance as a second place team, and then have to have a rematch against New Zealand for the title. The amount of wins that Sri Lanka need itself is not ridiculous, but the caliber of opponents that they're playing, India, New Zealand, South Africa, and even Pakistan, is going to be very, very difficult for them. But if they can pull through, a couple of players hit form at the right time, then do not write Sri Lanka off just yet. And now, Bangladesh. Their route to the final is far from straightforward, but they're still in the race. They have 4 series left, including some really important games against Australia and South Africa. So can Bangladesh realistically turn this into a place in the World Test Championship final? Let's put it into the simulator. You can see in the table that Bangladesh have a lot of catching up to do to break into that top 4, and that starts with a few non-negotiables towards the end of the cycle. They need to win against England in home conditions 2-0, which is more realistic than it was in the past. Then they also need to win against West Indies, again in home conditions 2-0. Then you get to the tougher series against Australia and South Africa. If they can go and win one game each in these tough conditions against these tough opponents, that would actually put them at the top of the table. But let's say against Australia, for example, that the conditions are just too tough and you lose 2-0. Even then, you have a chance to make up ground in the other series, and if they could win 2-0, then they retain that 69.44 PCT and they would finish top of the table. So, I genuinely think Bangladesh can make the final. Their route is difficult, but it's not unrealistic. They need to get results against Australia and South Africa, while taking maximum points where they can elsewhere. Importantly, as I'm recording this, Bangladesh are actually holding their own against Australia. So this isn't just some ridiculous hypothetical, they're already showing they can compete with one of the best teams in the world. They'll still need plenty of other results to go their way, but don't rule Bangladesh out just yet. And finally, England. They're sitting 6th in the table on my baseline, and it gets even worse when you consider that they've already lost points because of their overrate. So their route to the final is probably the most difficult we've looked at. And unlike India, England don't have the luxury of taking points off the teams around them. They've already played and lost to India, Australia and New Zealand. So they can't directly hurt the teams they're chasing, but they're not mathematically out yet. So what would England actually have to do to pull off the impossible? You can visually see the gap between England in 6th and New Zealand in the 2nd position where England need to get to if they want to qualify for the final. And they need to almost double their PCT. And that starts by winning all of the remaining games that stand in their way. The home series against Pakistan, 3-0. And then the 2 tough away series. Bouncy conditions of South Africa, they need to still win 3-0. And Bangladesh, which will be tough with spin. If they can win that 2-0, that puts them in 4th position. Then, with this same PCT of 53.17, this is their max PCT that they can get to, they need a specific set of results to go their way externally, and that starts with Australia winning against South Africa 2-0, India need to beat New Zealand 2-0, and then you need Australia to beat India 3-1, and then finally, you need Australia to beat New Zealand 3-0. And then England, with this low PCT of 53.17, will somehow set up an Ashes final at the Oval. So, England can technically still make the final, but they need to win all 8 of their remaining tests. And even that isn't enough on its own. They need India, South Africa, and New Zealand to drop points as well. Unlike India, England can't take those points themselves because they've already lost to 2 of those 3. So mathematically, they're alive. Realistically, this would be an absolute miracle. And there you go. South Africa and New Zealand are the most obvious final. But that's the beauty of this WTC race. It doesn't take much to completely change the picture. A few shock results and suddenly the likes of Australia, India and Bangladesh can find themselves in the final. Sri Lanka and England will definitely find it tougher, but don't bet against them just yet. If you're still here, please subscribe to the follow-on feed. It genuinely means a lot. And don't forget to like and share the video with your friends if you enjoyed it. And of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Finally, I made this simulator myself. So if you want access, I have my email in the description. Please get in touch. Thank you for watching.